and welcome back to another edition of media analysis in the form of a rewrite. Today we're going to talk about how I would fix Centaurworld Season 2. And unlike some of the other stuff that I've talked about, I actually did really like the second season of Centaurworld. I like the show as a whole. It was really good. Finale made me cry multiple times. So I did really enjoy it, but the Season 2 started off very weak. It was not great, and I don't know much about what was going on with the production. I don't know if they had maybe time issues, budgetary issues, whatnot. Maybe they kind of had to make a choice to make the finale good or make the earlier episodes good, in which case the finale was worth it for sure. It was definitely worth kind of that rocky middle bits, but again, I don't know. So let's take a look at those rocky middle bits and how I would fix them. Starting with the first episode of Season 2. And the big thing here is the biggest change we're making to the season overall is we're going to take this main plot of Episode 1, this whole Centaurs TM plot, and we're going to take the main plot of Episode 4 with the whole TARS, and we're just going to switch them. Like this, all the various subplots, like the stuff with Durpleton and Stabby and all that, those are kind of have to stay as is, just to change a little bit to accommodate the other changes going on in the main plot. But yeah, we're flopping those main plots. And now, obviously, I would guess that the reason that they had the Centaurs TM as the plot of that first episode is that it is kind of a big, exciting thing for your first episode of the season, right? You want your first episode to be a good draw. But I feel like ultimately, even though it's not as exciting to have the whole TARS and especially the Moltars we've seen before start off the season, I think making the SWAT is going to solve more problems than it causes. And we'll kind of go through the problems that it solves as we go through this rewrite. But just to start off with, first thing that it does address is this weird thing about the whole TARS being able to all burrow their way through the dimensional walls. They don't need a portal, I guess. They can just dig into other dimensions, which is, if it was just a joke about Doug doing it, it would be fine, right? It just, as a joke, you don't have to think about it too much. We're not meant to take it seriously. This show definitely has plenty of jokes like that. That would be fine. But then Horse, uses that as a reason to go back to the Moltars and to ask them all for help again. And at that point, it's changing, it's dictating our plot, it's shaping our plot. And at that point, you kind of have to take it seriously. And if we're taking it seriously, that has a lot of implications. Every single Moltar, every single Holtar can dig through dimensional walls, and I feel like there are a lot of implications of that should have affected stuff. That's a lot. So I think if we just skip that, it would be better. And so if we have the episode with the whole TARS as the first episode, then we don't need an excuse to go back and talk to them again. So that's primarily what this thing is doing, right? And it's an excuse for us to go back and talk to the whole TARS again. So if we have it as the first episode, then we can just switch up that introductory song that Horse gives and just cut the Moltars out of that song. And then as they sing the song, and then they're like, okay, what next? And okay, we're gonna go back to the Moltars next. This is now our last resort, the last group that we can go to. Maybe they were reluctant to go back to it because they were afraid of getting thrown in jail again. But so they're our last group that we're gonna go talk to, and so we don't need any extra justification for that. So and speaking of switching up that song, obviously in the original version of the song, they interrupt a Moltar wedding, they interrupt Mary's wedding. So what I think would be funny, because I would like to keep that whole interrupting a wedding thing. So I think how we could rework it that would be funny is if it was Sunfish Smurguys and Jessica's wedding that they interrupted, right? and kind of have it like where Horse did not know. It's like, oh my God, I see this, that now. This is a wedding. But Wamawink, we can tell she's like, what? No, I had no idea. Like, she planned this. So I think that would be fun. And then when they're walking away at the end of the song, you know, they're walking away from the wedding, I think it would also be funny to have, you know, like them all talking about they ruined Sunfish Moonrise Jessica's wedding, and then have a comment about how Jessica like asked Wamawink to be a bridesmaid, like because they're both the I guess llamatars. I think they're llamas rather than alpacas. Maybe they're alpacatars. No, she says llama lady, but maybe one's llama. Whatever. So they're a similar kind of centaur, and we don't see any others of this kind of centaur. And you know there was the war, so maybe that's Jessica was like, oh, you know, it's another person who's the same kind of centaur as me. I would like to bond with you. I don't know. It doesn't matter why. Just as a funny little joke to be like, you know, it's weird that she asked you to be the bridesmaid. And Wamawink's like, yeah, you know, I was kind of flattered, but you know, I hate her. Definitely still hate her, but still, it was nice we asked. Well, it's just funny too, the idea that they wrecked this wedding and then Jessica's like, hey, by the way, you want to be my bridesmaid? So, yeah. So, that's how we're gonna fix that. Then we go to the Moltars. We're gonna try to recruit them. We have the whole deal with, you know, Horse fails at recruiting them, and then freaks out and gets upset, and then all of that. And so ultimately, it leads to Wamawink having the idea for the Hootenanny. I'm proposing that, and I think it'd be good to have her, like, she proposes the Hootenanny, and then she says, you know, once the whole Tars Guild get excited, have her say something along the lines of, and like everyone knows that it's not a real Hootenanny unless all of the shamans come, and then Judge Jacket can be like, yep, that you learned that on the first day of shaman school, really. All Hootenannies need all shaman to be there, and don't worry, I'll take care of it. I'll make sure they all show up. So this solves the issue where, so it solves this weird issue that we have where the story wants to start with Horse getting rejected over and over. She gets rejected by everyone that she has talked to previously, and also they get rejected by the Centaurs TM, but she gets rejected a lot. But then by the time we get to the Hootenanny, all those people who said no are there without any real explanation beyond what we can assume is that they got invited to the Hootenanny, and then they're like, yeah, sure. They didn't want to join the army, but when they got the invite to the Hootenanny, they decided to show up. Which, I mean, that could be fine, but at the same time, that makes everything that we just watched feel pointless. Like, oh, we could have gotten everyone to show up just by sending them an invite to a Hootenanny. Then why did we go to all these places and try to recruit all these people? We could have just been sending out Hootenanny invites to everyone. Like, we could have saved ourselves so much time, so much effort. So when we front load and put the Hootenanny be something that we decide on in the first episode, then we can assume that they are still going around because it is still needful. Obviously, just sending out Hootenanny invites wouldn't have worked, or they would have done that. And it also explains why everyone else that already rejected them showed up, or rather it explains, you know, the Whale Tar and Johnny Tea Time and the trees. And if the Whale Tar is coming, then I can believe the Mer guys would come without any additional need for explanation. And same thing with Johnny Tea Time and the Cat Tars. And then that just leaves like the various Forest Tars, and at that point, they just kind of blend in with everyone. You might stop and think, wait a second, they said no, and we never saw, you know, them change their mind. They don't have a shaman who changed their mind for them, whatever. They got peer pressured into it, maybe. I don't know. Like, it becomes minor in comparison to in the canon version, where there were just so many people who had all said no that showed up. And the other thing that putting the Hootenanny here at the beginning does for us is it gives us like a sense of like a very clear defined goal that we're working towards, and a clear defined like, you know, next step that we're trying to get to. What I mean by that is, let's look at the first season for a second, right? So in the first season, the first episode, Horse gets thrown into Centaurworld, and by the end of the episode, so she wants to get back home, obviously. And so by the end of the episode, we established for her, okay, you need to follow the Rainbow Road and find the shaman, and that's how you're gonna get home. Like, clear, defined goal. And then by the time when she gets to Water Baby, she's given an expansion on that. It's a new goal that's similar, but, you know, she's got to follow the road, commune with the shamans, convince each one of what needs to be done, and each shard that they guard will be yours. Fragments required to open dimensional doors. There's a whole song about it. Like, there's a very clear understanding what the goal is, so we as the viewers have a clear idea as we're going. Okay, she has, you know, the 1 shard, she's got 2, 3, whatever, and we have a clear vision of what the end point is going to be. The end point is when she's collected all the key pieces and when she's reached the rift, right? In this second season here, we know she's got to recruit an army, but we don't have any clear sense of, like, when do we reach the end of that phase, right? What are, obviously, all the people that she's trying to recruit are, besides the Holtars, or at least specifically the Moltars, all those people we see her trying to recruit in various episodes are all new people. So it's not like we have a concept of, here are all the various groups that she could reach out to recruit, and once we've reached out to all of them, that's the end. We don't have a clear sense of, here's how many people they're trying to recruit, so once we get to that many, then we're good. We don't have a clear sense of, okay, well, they have this deadline that they have to recruit as many people as they can by the deadline. There's no sense of, you know, when does this end? It's just we're running around recruiting people. And there's also no sense of what happens when, you know, when the trash tars say yes, and the bird tars, coal tars, when they all say yes, what's the next step? Like, bird tars are just still chilling up in their cloud condo for, you know, until the hootenanny thing happens. But so they said yes. What was the plan there? Like, you know, so if we have the hootenanny in the first episode, then we have a clear sense of the deadline. Okay, so we're going to go around recruiting as many people as we can before the hootenanny. So clear sense of that's what we're building towards. And it's a very clear sense of, okay, we've recruited the bird tars, and so we're going to tell them, great, meet us at the hootenanny. You know, then we're gonna figure out next steps from there. It just gives it a more structure, and, like, technically, an in-universe timeline like that, like, we don't know. You could put as many episodes as you want between now and the hootenanny, but as long as you don't extend it for 5 million episodes, it gives it enough structure that you feel like we're working towards something, even if we don't have an external way of judging how close we are to that. At least we know that there is a way that they're judging that by. So that's great. So obviously, like I said, some of the subplots would have to be switched around. The Derpleton and Stabby subplot would not be that part in this episode. This would just be, you know, the same stuff they were doing in the original first episode and all that. And, you know, we're not going to be seeing Becky Apples in this thing. It's just going to be Horse is maybe down on herself because she's anxious about the fact that the Moltars are now the last group of centaurs that she has previously worked with, that she knows anything about, and she's, like, really anxious about trying to get them to agree, because if they don't agree, then who are we going to talk to next? Now what? So yeah. And then again, ultimately works out like in canon with the ending would be a little bit different, obviously, because they're just going to have to decide to go to a different group afterward. It's not going to be Horse running off and falling in a hole. But yeah, so Womalink gets everyone to agree, gets them all on by getting them all on the same page, and excitement for this hootenanny, which also gives us our structure. And also she knew about the hootenanny trick because of her past experience in shaman school. So it was Womalink bringing her own skills to the table there, both in wrangling a bunch of rowdy herd, wrangling a bunch of rowdy Holtars, and her shaman knowledge. Cool. So, next episode, the bird tar episode. I don't really totally understand what the thought process even was here, to be honest. like on a very high conceptual level, the idea of a bunch of bird tars like being up in a cloud condo and like watching Centaurworld below them and treating it like a TV show that they're fans of, and then bringing our herd up here and like throwing a basically herd con, which is basically Comic-Con, right? Like that's a funny idea. That on that conceptual level, it's funny. But there's just so much other stuff that just is so confusing about this episode. Firstly, it was a risky move. It was a cool idea, but it was a risky move in this context because season 1 dropped as like a whole packet of 10 episodes on July 30th of 2021. Yeah. And then season 2 dropped as its whole packet of 8 episodes on November, I believe 7th. Was it November? I think so. 7th of 2021. There was basically 4 months in between season 1 and season 2 dropping. And each season, like I said, dropped all at once. So it's not like it was, the point is they didn't have time. And I kind of assumed that season 2 was already in production. Like I don't think, obviously internally they had this clear idea of the season 1, season 2 split. But I don't think internally it was like, oh, we got renewed and now we're going to start another season, right? I don't know. I don't know what happened with production there. Just a guess based on animation timelines. Like it's not the quickest kind of show to make. The point being, with 4.5 months between the two, that is enough time for the fandom to have like kind of started developing, kind of started to get its footing, and certain characters to like opinions on various characters to really start to emerge. It really probably is going to take a little longer than that for a fandom to really, I feel like, settle in if it's going to be a big fandom. But definitely you're going to start to see patterns start to emerge as far as how people feel about certain characters, feel about certain plot points, etc. So the audience watching this show, the ones that are involved in fandom in any way for the show, who have like talked about other people and know about opinions that fans of the show have had, they're going to have that knowledge of what to expect. But the writers had no idea that the way the fandom was going to develop. Like they did, because they had to start working on this episode way before, probably before the first season even came out, much less before like reactions and feelings could really solidify about characters. So they just kind of had to guess. And I will say, guessing that Comfortable Doug was going to be like a breakaway, very popular character, and guessing that Womawink was going to be the character that everyone found kind of annoying and was the worst, it wasn't a bad guess, just based on what I know about fandoms in general. But especially for the Womawink side of it, it was the wrong guess. They guessed wrong. They guessed and they guessed wrong. And that was a risk. That was the risk they were taking when they decided to do this. And so I do question the wisdom of that decision in this context. If it had been in a season 1 episode, it might have worked better because the fandom wouldn't have developed yet, so we wouldn't have a concept of what the fandom was. And obviously, if they had had like a year between seasons, then they would have had enough time to see where the fandom was at and to tailor their episode to work with that. But this was like a weird in between that it just didn't quite work. Then there's also kind of like HerdCon is definitely supposed to be Comic-Con. Like the little logo they have, it's like the squared where it's like HerdCon, just like Comic-Con. Like it's supposed to be Comic-Con, like, or that's what it's referencing. And a lot of the way that like they talk about the herd and their adventures and all that, it definitely comes across like this is supposed to be a fandom for a fictional show. But then they also have Crandy in there and like the whole likes and the little dead baby, they're not dead, they're little like gasping baby birds, they're underdeveloped baby birds, as tweet jokes, and the Crandygrams, which I assume is like an Instagram reference. Like it's very an influencer fandom rather than like fictional TV show fandom. and not to say that there's like no overlap there, or like that some of the fandoms don't, like, a fandom is still a fandom, so some ways it is going to develop similarly, but they are two different things. Crandy does not act like a BNF, big name fam. She acts more, or maybe she does on Twitter. I don't do fandom on Twitter. Maybe it's really weird over there. Who knows? But she acts more like a regular influencer. So it felt a little incongruent because of that. Also, it's weird how at times they're like super disengaged. The fans are super disengaged, and sometimes they're like really into it. Like they're so excited that the herd is here, but then the herd put on their little like skit version of what happened inside the rift, and everyone's like super bored and like coughs, and they're like just not into it. And I'm like, yeah, it's not a great production, but I feel like real fans of a real show watching their, like, the actors, obviously, because that characters are the actors in this version, but like in real world, the actors like putting on a little skit about what happened, and it's really awkward and bad. I feel like people would just love it more, to be honest. Like, so hype, super into it, and it's just weird to see the audience be disengaged, and like it feels like the way the fans act is more dictated by what we needed to fit like a particular tone of what we wanted to happen in the episode at this point, than like a consistent sense of these fans are this kind of fan and this is how they would behave, which kind of brings us to the biggest issue with this episode. Is it's so mean. It's just so mean to fans and the concept of fandom. Like, it's just so mean. Like, I do not understand why they made it so mean. Supernatural is nicer to its fans in its fandom episodes, and I don't think I could come up with a more damning indictment if I tried. Like, it's just really mean. I don't understand why. Like, who thought that was a good idea? It's one thing for the like Centaur episode to be a little bit bitchy about the idea of pageants and pageant shows. It's still kind of mean, but not everyone watching your show is going to be like a big pageant person. But you can assume that a lot of the people who are watching your show are probably fans of your show, and so probably are not going to take kindly to an episode that's so mean to them, about them. It just makes them look so like such awful people all around. And I don't know, like I watched the fan behavior in this episode, and I recognize all of these like fans, but they're like the worst. They picked all the worst aspects of fans and fandom and the way fans can behave. And it's like saying like, oh, you know, here is your family, and then the only person they show is your one really racist uncle who got deep into QAnon in 2020. Like, yeah, he's my family, but I don't really want you to present him as though this is representative. So yeah, it's weird that they did that, and I don't understand why. And so the biggest fix for this episode, honestly, is just make it less mean. I think obviously we still need to make them feel a little bit goofy, whatever. It needs to be a little bit off kilter. Like, you can't have them be like super great and helpful. But so I think what we could do is just make them, they're just too into the story of the first season and too into like, you know, analyzing that and being big fans of whatever, that they can't even focus on the idea of like, this is the real war that's coming. You know, we need to engage with this like real thing that's going on. Like, they want to keep talking about their, you know, fanfics or whatever. And till Zulius, you know, puts it to them in the form of, like he does at the end of the episode, in the form of, hey, here's how you can be a part of this show. And I mean, that's not the kindest version of characters anyways, but at least it's a consistent thing of this is what their flaw is, and it's not super mean. Like, why are they such dicks to the characters, Heidi. Oh, why, baby? Can you tell me why they would do that? No, you don't know either? She's stumped. So yeah, that's the biggest thing. It's just like, I don't have like any major plot changes to the episode. Just make it less mean, you guys. It might be a good idea to try to focus, like maybe even pull away a little bit from the idea of like Comic-Con fandom and focus more on like an influencer fandom. That's like another way they could take it. Just because outside of this particular episode, it does feel like it's more influencer kind of fandom than it does feel like it's, you know, fictional kind of fandom. Like that feels more what they try to lean into. And also, you know, not everyone watching their show is going to be into influencer fandom, but everyone watching their show is probably a fan of their show. So yeah, I think that's an easier way to get away from it feeling quite so mean, but at the same time, it wouldn't quite work with what they want to do in the plot of this episode, so maybe that doesn't work. But, I don't know. Ultimately, though, I do like that the episode ends with Zulius kind of using his understanding of fans and the way fans think and feel in fandom, and kind of using that to our herd's advantage to get everyone to agree to join the war. Like, I think that works well. It works well with his backstory. It works well towards what we're building towards here. So that's good. Then the third episode, the episode with the coal tars. As a side note, I did really like the joke that they did where they began episode 2 with like talking to the coal tars, and then they get, you know, scooped up by the bird tars, and then we have this whole episode, and then we come back to episode 3, and the start is like literally the exact same thing, and then we actually go into the episode. That's great. Good joke. Anyways, third episode, honestly, it's good. I don't really have any commentary on this one. Or rather, there's some things I'm going to say about this one, but I am saving up all the stuff that's happening in the human worlds. I'm going to tackle all of that across all these first episodes when I do episode 5, Becky Apples. So on the Centaurworld side of this episode, it's good. I like it. I like the way they use Glendale, like, anxieties, and she was like able to use that to, you know, Mama gives the whole speech about how she was able to use that to empathize and understand where these guys were coming from, and, you know, help bring them around. Again, it works to what we're kind of building here, right? Where Mama has her experience, you know, wrangling the herd, so she kind of knows how to deal with conflicting personalities and keep them going in the right direction. Plus her experience with being a shaman, she has all that knowledge. And then we have Zulius, who has this knowledge of dealing with fans and fandom. And we have Glendale, oh my god, Glendale, with her knowledge of anxiety and knowing how to talk to people and help them with that, right? And then we go into our fourth episode, which is one with the Centaurs TM. So obviously this time we're going to have the subplot with Becky Apples, where when they're going to see the Centaurs TM, Horse is really banking on, like, I'm a horse, I know how to talk to these horses, but she's feeling very self-conscious about the fact that, you know, she hasn't recruited anyone yet, and she's feeling very self-conscious finding out about Becky Apples. And I really think it'd be very funny if once the door person comes out with the list, if somehow either Horse or maybe like Wamawink trying to talk to Horse, or someone says Becky Apples' name, like not giving the name, they just say her name as we're waiting to get in and try to figure out something, and the door person's immediately like, oh, Miss Rebecca Apples, I'm sorry, come right in, like, Becky Apples' name is on the list. How did her name get on the list? How did Gary end up in Moltar jail? It doesn't matter. Again, this is the case where it's just a joke. You don't have to think about the implications. It's funny if Becky Apples is on the list. So I think they should have done that. So they get in. We're gonna skip the whole thing about the rest of the herd getting thrown in with the luggage. We will kind of be able to work towards that, but we're not gonna do that plot line because I want to have Horse and Wamawink and Ched, like, all kind of hanging out. And Zulius, obviously, he's just off admiring all the boulder shoulders. And then we'll have Durpleton and Stabby's plotline, which we'll get to. So Womawink, I don't know what Glendale did. She's running around stealing shit. Obviously, Glendale's running around stealing shit. So we have Horse, Womawink, and Ched. And Horse is like, you know, trying to be like, yeah, all gung-ho about the horses, but at the same time, she's like super stewing over this whole Becky Apples thing. And unlike, even though I love the song Becky Apples, and maybe we'll find a way to get a version of that, but I want to say, unlike in canon, what we're going to have is Womawink is actually going to be kind of like trying to, you know, empathize with Horse and like validate her upset, but at the same time being like, well, you know, I had a real Becky Apples in my life, Jessica, but, you know, once we started talking, I found out she wasn't really that bad, and I feel like Horse, when have you even been talking with Jessica? And Womawink just like, well, we're kind of pen pals now, it's not a big deal, whatever. But yeah, so Womawink and Jessica have made up. So Jessica had invited her to be a bridesmaid, and now they've made up. They're friends now. And so Womawink's trying to cool Horse down, like, hey, it's fine, whatever. But Ched is like, no, be bitter, be spiteful, fucking sucks. And really egging Horse on. Like, I heard this Becky Apples is a horse, and all horses suck. So I'm with you, girl. She probably sucks. Really egging her on. So another thing that we're gonna have is another advantage of that flip that we did is, so obviously Ched is from or grew up with the Centaurs team. And it's weird. I fully understand why it happened. But there's this weird thing where the first episode like gives us enough clues that it's very obvious that was the case, but it doesn't actually like explicitly like go into like, by the way, here's his backstory. Like, Horse seems really oblivious. Like, she seems super obtuse to have not picked up on this until the next episode where she jumps into his backstory and sees it. Like, it was real obvious, girl. How were you missing all of those signs? So yeah, but the point being, it's weird because it spreads Ched's backstory basically across 2 episodes, which would be fine in a longer show, or if Ched's backstory were more important to the plot, or if Ched as a character was like one of the main characters, it's fine to spread it out a little bit. But it's not a longer show, and Ched is like, he's a supporting character, but he's not any more important than any of the other supporting characters. So it's weird that we spread his backstory out across these 2 episodes. And the reason that it's like that, I have to assume, is, again, they put the Centaur TM episode first because it would make a good opening episode, and if you're going to have that Centaur TM episode, obviously you're going to have to allude to the fact that Ched grew up here. Like, it would be really, really weird if nothing happened to allude to that. But you can't put Ched's whole backstory in this first episode. Like, it would give way too much weight to Ched's backstory. If the first episode of the season were an episode about Ched's tragic backstory, kind of makes it seem like Ched's backstory is real important to this story. So you can't do it that. Plus, if Horse finds out Ched's backstory all the way back at the beginning of the season, and kind of, you would expect it to maybe have some impact on their relationship going forward, and the fact that it doesn't is, I don't know, a little weird. I guess it's not that weird. Well, no, she learned about Womawink's backstory, and that really redefined their relationship. So you would think that Ched's backstory would help her, at least for a minute. Anyways, so I get why you couldn't do it in the first episode. It doesn't make sense. So that's why you had to split it up. But if we move the Centaurs TM to the 4th episode, then you can just do his backstory in this episode where it makes sense to do his backstory. Not that the backstory episode doesn't make sense, but it kind of doesn't. We'll get to it. So yeah, you can just do his backstory in this episode, and we can still do like the tulip stepping song. Like, we can still save that flashback for the backstory episode, but the majority of the stuff, like with the impact of his backstory and like kind of realizing it and being sad about it or whatever, can happen in this episode. And that can kind of come out a bit as part of that whole being bitter. He's egging Horse on, like, hold a grudge and never let it go. And of course he's like that, you know, because of this whole thing with the Centaurs TM. He's holding on to that grudge and he's never letting it go, right? And then we get to the point where Horse is talking to Mirangela and trying to convince her, and then Ched's like, no, let me do this. But in this version, like, so you think, oh man, he is about to go off, like he's gonna be so pissed. No, he uses his knowledge of what these guys are like to get them to say yes. Like, he manipulates them to the same way Zulius and Glendale, I guess Womwing too, hers is less manipulative, manipulate the other people into getting them to say yes. And Chad's like, well, what? Yeah, I hate them, but you said we needed them for the war, so... So now in this version, we've got, you know, Ched has also managed to recruit something. So like that was one thing that kind of does bother me about the canon season 2 is Ched doesn't recruit anyone. Like, the rest of the herd do, if you count Durpleton recruiting Stabby, which is one guy, but he was also a Minotaur, so it's pretty impressive for that. But Ched doesn't recruit anyone. So, like, it just makes it a little less impactful. So I like the idea of him actually successfully managing to recruit the Centaurs. TM. I get why in the original version, that's not where they go, because they wanted to have the recruiting the trash tars be like the final little bright spot after knows all episode long. But since we've moved this to episode 4, like, that's not really the concern anyways. So yeah, he convinces the Centaurs TM to join. And now, again, that's Ched using his knowledge that he has, in this case, from, you know, growing up there. A painful experience that he went through, but he still is able to use the knowledge he gained from that experience to benefit them. And we can see even him being the one who's egging Horse on and, like, hold a grudge forever. Even he is like, but I can put it aside for a second for the war. It's a war. Anyway, so... have them leaving the Centaur's TM place, and like Horse is down on herself because like she hasn't recruited everyone else in this herd. Like, she thought she was here to like create this army, but she hasn't done anything. Everyone else has done something. Even, like I said, even Durpleton managed to win over a Minotaur, and Womwing's like, well, you know, it's just one. You know, just one Minotaur. It's not that many. So... which is when the trash tars come out. Backtrack. So Durpleton and Stabby, they still have the same plot line as in the episode 4, like the canon one. Only obviously instead of running around in like the maze of tunnels and holes, Stabby is running around. Philip J. Stabby Bone Crusher, his full name, is running around inside like this maze of this like big mansion, house, like complex, whatever. And they end up in the luggage room, which is really gross and trashy and whatever. And that's where they have their little, you know, beautiful father-son bonding moment. So we have that. So again, trash tars have shown up and they're like, hey, we're here to help. We want to join your cause. And Horse is like, you know, we heard your little speech. And Horse is like, okay, yeah, great. And she's excited. And they're like, no, we're talking to them. Talking to Durpleton and Stabby, their father-son moment, like that really touched us. So yes, Durpleton recruits the trash tars, kind of accidentally, but he does it. So that's when Horse freaks out and runs off, and I guess she falls in a hole. That works fine. So yeah, everyone has recruited someone except for Horse. So then we get to the backstory episode, and you know, Womwing's like, we have a new team building. So basically, she's just trying to cheer Horse up, but Horse isn't into it. And then we have the whole backstory thing. I would like to actually have Zulius' backstory, and like the joke where Horse refuses to look at his backstory, it is pretty funny, but I think the overall kind of thing that we're trying to build here works better if we can see Zulius' backstory too, to kind of reinforce something. We'll get to it. Though, again, I do like the joke. We don't get to see it. And, like, the backstory that he's describing is Julius trying to imply that he's Batman? Like, pearls for days and Allie? Like, I don't know. Anyways. But, you know, instead, I would like us to see a little bit of his backstory. Like, I think maybe when Splendid steals the glitter cats from him, and I think it'd be really funny if it was just super petty. Like, you know, we get in his backstory, and Julius is like, he's like all dressed up in like fancy party clothes, and he's like clearly like running this party, and he's like, the glitter cats are behind him, and he's telling Kale and Char, like, no, of course I am not bitter that Splendid won. Would I be throwing this party for him if I was upset? Said in a tone that is clearly very, very upset. And then he's like, oh my god, what is that? And we see it's like a chocolate fountain. He's like, I specifically ordered cheese fondue, not chocolate fondue. Caterers messed it up. Like, he's losing his shit over this. And then Splendid walks up and he's like, I told him to change it. Everyone knows chocolate is better than cheese. And then, like, glitter cats, they look at each other and like, yeah. And they go stand behind Splendid, and that is it. Julius just starts losing it, and he just starts trashing the party. I don't know, just something stupid like that. I think it would be funny. And then when we get into Durpleton's backstory, when Julius comes running up to the helicopter, have him still be in those fancy party clothes, like maybe like kind of ripped up and trashed a little bit. Like, literally, he just ran straight from the party to just jump on this helicopter. Like, it cracks me up anyways. And we can make room for the Julius flashback by shortening the Ched flashback a little bit. Because like I said, we already got his backstory just last episode. So we can still do the like Tulip Stepping Champion song, but maybe just the song. We don't need to see the cruelty that happens afterwards because we already know. And we don't need to like linger on it as much. So we get to see everyone's backstories, and we end on Durpleton's. And that's the other reason I want to move the main emotional impact of Chad's backstory to the previous episode, is so that the emotional impact of this episode can be totally focused on what we learned about Durpleton's backstory and, you know, the whole thing with his parents, his father particularly, because the way it plays out currently, we have Ched's backstory and we're like, oh, that's sad, and then Durpleton's backstory like overshadows it. So I'd like to keep our focus on Durpleton in this episode, and so we can have Ched's stuff in the last episode where we can let that emotional impact of that hit us. So yeah, we get all the different backstories, and then afterwards we have Horse reflecting on the fact that, you know, okay, I've been throwing a pity party for myself, but like, we've all been through shit. And also kind of, she wouldn't say shit. They don't curse in that show. We've all been through stuff. We've all been through stuff, and, you know, I was being kind of selfish, and, like, also kind of reflecting on the idea of that, you know, we all have unique traits, qualities that we can bring to the table. We all have stuff we can contribute. Like, they all managed to recruit, you know, different portions of the army, and maybe that wasn't Horse's thing, but she still can contribute, whatever. Just the point is, the idea of like, we all have something to contribute, and then have them be like, even Becky Apples? Or it's just like, oh, yes, I guess even Becky Apples, that's fine. And kind of like open herself up to the idea that she's gonna make an effort to be nice to Becky Apples, or at least not like outright hate her. And so of course we'll ultimately, then we get to see the episode, The Ballad of Becky Apples, and we get to see that Becky Apples is in fact the worst. And then when Horse and Ryder meet up, Horse can be like, oh, and I heard, Becky, you have a new horse, Becky Apples? Like she's gonna try. She's gonna try. And then Ryder's like, oh, no, she's the worst. And Horse like, oh, thank God. So just seeing Horse being, like, I don't know, I just don't like where the episode, or I guess the show leaves us off, where Horse just fucking hates Becky Apples for no good reason. So I like the idea that Horse is like theoretically willing to try to give Becky Apples a chance, and then is immediately validated, no, you don't have to worry about it. So like, we believe that Horse would be a better person she just doesn't have to bother, because honestly, we do not have time to get into that. So that's fine. But at least she was willing to try to give her a chance. So I think that's kind of a better place to leave us than with her just being like, actually, Becky Apples fucking sucks, and I hate her. She's the worst. Anyways, yeah. So that's where we end there, and then we go into, you know, the Becky Apples episode. And actually, now before I do that, I just want to. This is not something that is going to be made explicit, but kind of what we're building to here. Just because again, this is supposed to also be media analysis, and this, to a certain extent, does exist in the show, and so I was trying to build on that from the show with this rewrite. This is not me like introducing a brand new theme that they didn't even think to do. This is me like seeing what was there and saying, how can we build on this work, make work better towards that, make it a little bit clearer without, you know, straight up spelling it out, which by this part is not actually in the episode. It's just me talking to you guys. I think so it's the idea of all these different characters having gone through shit, but at the same time being able to use that, what they went through, to like reach out to people, to know how to work with people, and this like sort of idea of extending empathy and understanding, and it's a little bit different for every one of them, and some of them are a little tenuous, but like, so we have Mama Wink with her, you know, she went through this whole pain of losing her whole village. That is what inspired her to become a shaman, and that's what inspired her to go find her own herd that she could actually protect and keep safe. And those experiences of, you know, learning going to shaman school, and the experience of having her own herd are the things that she was able to build on in order to recruit the Holtars, to understand where they're coming from, like working on understanding conflicting personalities and getting to work together, something she has experienced in because of her past pain. So there's that. Then similarly, kind of with Zulius, again, this one's a little bit more of a stretch, but like his past, like bad experience. So he had this past experience with fans where he was good and he's happy, and it went wrong on him. So that past experience of it going wrong kind of gives him an insight into how it could go wrong. And also just his past experience with fans in general is kind of soured at this point because it went wrong, but he, like, you know, sets it aside. He works through the pain and does, you know, what he has, draws on this knowledge that he has learned in order to help them. Obviously, Glendale is a very direct, you know, she has this struggle with anxiety, so she's able to relate to them and their struggle with anxiety. That one's very clear. With Ched, it is a bit more like the Zulius situation. Well, not exactly, but where it was just this past experience was very painful for him, but he is able to set that aside and use what he learned in that time period to benefit them. And then with Durpleton, I really like this about the whole Durpleton Stabby thing, how well it's done, where we see that Durpleton initially, and this is like, you see this as you look back after you know the truth, where Durpleton initially was trying to give, you know, Stabby a lot of affection, a lot of affirmation, a lot of positive regard, because he never got that from his father, and that's something he'd always wanted from his father. So it was him trying to avoid anyone else having to go through the pain that he went through. But it ultimately caused him to make the same mistake that his father did, or not all of them, but one of the same mistakes his father did, of not listening to Philip J. Bonecrusher. And he had to realize that he had made that mistake and have that, like, sort of understanding of, oh my God, how hard it is to be a kid, a 42-year-old child, to be a kid and not have your parent listen to you when you're trying to talk, and like understanding that. And that's what reaffirmed their bond later, is when he realized, like, this is something that I also went through, so I understand what you're going through, and I feel bad about, you know, I feel bad the way I contributed to that, so he's gonna do better. So I really like how it kind of, how Durpleton both like breaks the cycle, but ultimately also accidentally perpetuates other aspects of this cycle because he's trying so hard to break it, basically. It's good. It's really good. I love all that. And so that part's all there in the story, obviously, already. But so it's this idea of, we've all gone through hard times, but also we've all learned stuff from those times, either learned from the pain or learned in spite of the pain, whatever. And we all have unique ways that we can, new things that we bring, unique skills that we have, and we can all reach out and try to understand where we're coming from and how that is going to be the best way to, bring people together, right? Is by trying to understand where they're coming from. And Horse's backstory magic obviously feeds right into that. This idea of, go into someone's past and literally see where they came from, helping you to understand them better and be able to have more compassion for them because of that. So, cool. Great. Now we can move into episode 5, Ballad of Becky Apples. But like I said, I'm actually going to start by looking at some of the Human World stuff from the earlier episodes because I just want to do it all at once here. So the first thing is when Ryder meets the general, and she doesn't recognize him at first. I admit that's not my favorite kind of joke, anyways. Where someone embarrasses themselves like that. I just get more of the secondhand embarrassment than I do find it humorous. But beyond that, I think it creates a problem in that, so this establishes, again, Ryder has never met the general before besides she's well, there was this one time, it kind of gets the impression maybe she saw him speak somewhere before at one point, or I don't know. But they've never really interacted, obviously, before this. The thing is, one of the few problems of the finale is the point where Horse tries to tell Ryder, that we got to get rid of the general. The general and the Nowhere King are the same person. Not that Horse does the best job ever at explaining this, but Ryder just immediately shuts her down, and it just does not feel earned at all. Up until this point, the show really has been a lot about this bond between Horse and Ryder and how close they are. Their family, their sisters, their best friends, very best friend. Really emphasizing how much these two love each other, the trust there, and all that, and the bond between Ryder in general. She just met this guy. This is the first time she met him, and I don't know how long a time period we're supposed to understand this had taken place over in universe, but from our perspective, she just met this guy, and we don't even see her interact with him very much. Maybe they do a lot off screen, but we don't see it. So there's just no bond there. So it just does not feel believable that she would just immediately shut Horse down in favor of the general. Just not even be willing to listen to him. So I think we cut the joke about her not recognizing the general and give this idea that, yeah, she does know the general, and there is this relationship there. There is this sort of mentor relationship, maybe even probably not full-on surrogate family, because it kind of feels like we're supposed to think Horse and Ryder are each other's only family. So I don't think surrogate father might be a little too far, but definitely a strong mentor sort of vibe there. And they do seem like they're maybe trying to go into that a little bit by the end. It just doesn't quite hit right because she didn't know him before this, right? So yeah, just cut that joke and just let them be, already know each other, already be relatively close. Then with Water Baby, when Comfortable Doug randomly pops up in her jail cell, have him explain he is here to invite her to the Hootenanny. Remember, Judge Jacket said she would make sure that all the shaman showed up to the Hootenanny, because all the shaman have to be at a Hootenanny for it to be a Hootenanny. So she sent Comfortable Doug, go get Water Baby, go let her know, make sure she comes to the Hootenanny, and that's why Doug shows up, right? And I think that makes a lot more sense. It gives us a lot better explanation for why he's here than he just likes to hang out in jail cells. In general, season 2, I feel like overuses Constable Doug. Like he's funny because he's like this really weird character, like but he constantly shows up being like really weird. It loses its impact. I mean, maybe other people feel differently, but I definitely feel like he's overused in this season. And I think one thing that's gonna help with that is if when he shows up to Water Baby, it's not like this random, like, oh yeah, I just like to hang out in exotic jail cells. I mean, I guess maybe that's part of his work. Not like literally part of his work, but like maybe he works at the Moltar jail because he likes jail cells. I don't know. Would you really want to do that? Like if your job is working at a prison, would you want to be like hanging out in one all the time off work too? It doesn't seem like he's really passionate about it, given when he left, he was like, I can't go back, you know, in his whole Comfortable Doug song. Anyways, I just think it would work better if he had a concrete reason for being there. And then we don't have to unpack this idea of him being able to dig through the dimensions because we know that he had a concrete reason for being there. We know that the portal's open, so you can just kind of assume that he went through the portal somehow. So that's that. And then once we get into the actual episode of Ballad of Becky Apples, honestly, that episode itself is totally fine, I think. The biggest thing, like I said, is just that we get to see here that Becky Apples is the worst. So that when, in the next episode, when Ryder and Horse reunite, we can have Ryder say, oh yeah, Becky Apples is the worst to Horse. And we can kind of wrap up the Becky Apples plotline there that way. So next episode with the Hootenanny, only a minor point, and this isn't even a complaint. This is just, again, building up those themes, and also kind of plot twist for this video. When I was like casually describing the like, here's a hypothetical that we could see Zulius's backstory. Yeah, that was me setting up a joke. Setting up the joke about Zulius and Splendid getting back together, because this time Zulius is like, we need this, and then, you know, we have to have space for and Splendid comes in and he's like, cheese fondue, and Zulius is like, I was gonna say chocolate, and then they look at each other and like, both? And now they're dating. So just the absurdity of they broke up because Splendid said chocolate fondue was better than cheese fondue, and then he shows up and he's like, maybe we should get a cheese fondue, and so he's like, no, you're right, chocolate, and they're like, actually both. Like, right? 7 punchlines. So that was something, I do love them suddenly randomly getting back together, but it is very abrupt in the episode. So if we have that little flashback to just set it up, and it doesn't have to be the exact scenario so it's described here, that's just one suggestion. But that, I think the punchline hits better if we set it up just a little bit more with that flashback. And also that goes in with our themes, right? Cheese fondue, chocolate fondue. No, they're better together. It's better if you have both. Where cheese fondue and chocolate fondue is a metaphor for humans and centaurs in this version. Anyways, that minor point, that like joke, I feel like just it could land a little bit better if there's just a little bit more setup to it. So, other than that, I like this episode. This one also made me cry. I'm just a sucker for the songs. The songs, like the mashup, reprise, whatever. No, I just cried. Like the centaurs on screen are all crying at the end of the song. I'm crying too, you guys. Great episode. Finale, like I already said, it is great. Couple just minor points in it. The first, I already discussed where it just doesn't quite hit that Ryder would not believe Horse over the general. It's technically the second point, whatever. I already touched on that. But the first one that shows up chronologically in the episode is when Horse is still inside the Nowhere King's mind, and Elk tells Horse, like, oh, you and I are a lot alike. And like, it's a very cliche thing, right? Where the villain tells the hero, I mean, Elk's not totally the villain, but close enough for our purposes. Villain tells the hero that you and I are a lot alike. It's super cliche. And a cliche isn't necessarily bad, right? Like, it wouldn't become a cliche in the first place if it was bad. But what something being cliche does mean is that people have seen it done a lot before. They have seen it done well, they have seen it done poorly, and they have seen it enough times to be able to tell the difference. So if you're going to do it, you better do it well. And this show, I just don't think pulls it off. I don't understand what, beyond the point that Horse makes about how, you know, she also has a human that she loves, and she was very sad and felt lost when they were separated. Which Horse makes that point, and then I was like, ooh, it's more than that. No, there it isn't. You know, there's nothing more to it than that. There's, what do they have in common, right? So Horse loves this woman, but like, she knows that her love for Ryder is requited. It's like, it's also probably not romantic love. I don't know, y'all can read into it whatever you want to, but it's definitely not explicitly romantic the same way Eltar's was for the woman. But like, that's not even, doesn't even matter. The type of love that Horse has for Ryder is definitely the same type of love that Ryder has for Horse, no matter what version of love you think it is, and they both know that it's requited. Whereas Eltar did not realize that she was into him. And more importantly, Horse doesn't have just an insanely, cripplingly degree of internalized racism, speciesism, right? Like, Horse loves being a horse. Horse thinks horses are the best things ever. Horse, like, to the point that her idea of what a horse even is probably a bit skewed, because she just loves being a horse so much, and she loves being herself so much. But Eltar here is like, not like other centaurs, and I'm gonna make that everyone's problem. His, like, the real, you see this a lot through the show, where like a lot of the blame tries to get pushed onto the woman, the princess, whatever, for like what happened to a certain degree. Like, he like straight up nowhere came tells her at one point, you made me what I am. And it's like, no, none of this was her. Like, she's just the convenient excuse for your incel self. Like, this is about you and your issues with centaurs and your internalized racism about centaur. Mr. like, yeah, well, I'm a centaur too, and I actually agree with you, but our jokes and our humor is lame, so like, ooh, it's bad. So, which none of that is a complaint. Like, that feels very real character, for him to, like, put all this blame on this other person, and like the general, not blame per se, but he is like, oh, I had to do this, I had to do all this so I could survive and tell you that I love you. And she was absolutely right to kick his fucking ass. Like, don't put this on me. Oh, he's the worst. And he knows it by the end when he lets her kill him. So there's, I guess, that little crumb. Anyways, kind of tangent. The point being, that's his issue, and that is not Horse's issue. Horse has no issues regarding that whatsoever. Like, her biggest point of insecurity is she thought maybe Becky Apples was a better horse than her, right? So it just, I don't even understand what we're supposed to think is like, oh yeah, this is what we have in common. They don't have that much in common. And if you cannot really sell something like that, then don't do it. Like I said, if it's a cliche, so I'm gonna know if it wasn't done well. The good news, though, is with the little extra emphasis that we put on this idea of, that we should be putting on this idea back in episode 5. Becky Apples is episode 6. So episode 5 is the one with the backstories. Anyways, back on the backstories episode of this idea of everyone has something they can bring to the table, everyone has merit, and like the importance of understanding where people are coming from. We can just have Horse just agree to go look. Like, they've talked about it a little more, and so she's like, I don't know, he's evil, but yeah, I guess that's why I have this power. Like, show me, convince me. Like, she doesn't believe it, but she's willing to hear him out. And then the other kind of minor point here is Ryder, like, trying to fake us out that Ryder died. Like, I didn't believe it. And I just got upset at them because I felt like you're trying to emotionally manipulate me by making me think that, oh my God, did Ryder die? No, obviously she didn't die. Obviously not. So I don't think that will fake out Ryder death really. I don't think it had the emotional impact they wanted it to, because it was so obvious that it was a fake out. And I just felt like I was being manipulated, so I didn't like that. So I think what's better is to have her dying, and you can have her kind of start that, but we don't cut quite yet. Let's bring Horse's rainbow tears. Let's actually do something with it and like have the rainbow tears fall on Ryder, and then like get like this flashlight. And I think something like where you can see a similar, like maybe a flashlight on Ryder's moon, and then Horse gets light on a similar part of her body or something. I want it to show that this is like empathetic healing that Horse has, like her magic healing powers that are specifically empathetic healing, right? Where she feels the pain, that heals it or whatever, that kind of thing. And she heals Ryder, and Ryder wakes up and maybe is still not feeling too great, but she's not about to die, kind of thing, right? Because that builds that same thing that we have been building towards all along, right? This sort of understanding where people are coming from to help bring them together to help join. And so understanding helps heal. Her having like this magic ability to empathize, like literally empathize with someone's pain, allows her to heal it. It all comes together. And I feel like it's a good payoff for the rainbow tears. I was waiting for those rainbow tears to pay off somehow, and they never did. Like, and that's not a failure. That was me just expecting something that just we're never gonna do. That was on me, but still, I think it'd be nice if they did. And then I think during the little shaman thing, where they make Horse a shaman, I also would love a little comment. You're talking about how Horse is such a good candidate to be a shaman because of her, experience, whatever, and like her powerful magic, and maybe just a little shout out about how her magic is also perfect kind of magic for this. And like a little thing, like you don't think just anyone would be able to get through the rift with just one key piece, did you? Just kind of like, I like this idea of that her magic again is all about empathy and understanding and healing and joining, right? So she was able to cross the rift with just the one piece, the key, even though normally you need the whole key to open the rift. She was able to cross with it because her power lends itself to bringing together. Because like her power, so that would be her having to do the magic to get across from human side to the Centaurworld side. And again, making that something that she has done with the help of the key piece, but it was magic that came from her too. Because it doesn't make sense that we need the full key otherwise, if you could just do it with one piece. I don't know. It's not a huge plot hole. It's just a thing that maybe could be nice if we explained it. But so that, and then we have, her backstory magic, right? It's about, looking into people's backstory, understanding where they're coming from. And the idea of her empathy healing, having that empathy, we only heal people. And even like her tale that tells jokes, laughter is the best medicine. Laughter, like jokes, and require you to understand the people that you're telling them to, right? I think even that could kind of indirectly tie in. And I'm not expecting any of this to be laid out in the episode itself. Again, aside from possibly it'd be nice to have a little hint that, yeah, it was your magic in combination with the key that got you across. The rest of it, I wouldn't expect them to play out in the episode, because you're not here to explain all the themes to people. You just want to give them enough to pick it up themselves. And like I said, these themes of like unification are definitely all very much present. I'm just making suggestions of how we could really build on that and do a little bit more with them. And yeah, that's it. That's my rewrite of Centaurworld Season 2, which doesn't desperately need a rewrite, but those middle episodes maybe do a little bit. I hope you enjoyed, and see you next time. Bye.